Hello, and welcome back to the first episode of Settle, Thrive, and Belong. Last year, I started with the first season of Facebook Live information session, Thursdays at 2, where we addressed some of the challenges our communities were facing and brought you the experts in the field to provide information and clarification around topics related to the pandemic. The program has received a lot of support from you all, and I'm very, very grateful for the support you've given us. This year, we have decided to start a new season that is focused on the journey of newcomers. This year, I will be hosting experts in the field every other week to help answer your questions regarding employment, immigration, mental health and well being, financial literacy, and personal development, as well as interpersonal effectiveness. Today, we mark over 14 months since the pandemic started in Canada. This pandemic has changed our lives in ways we have not thought of before. It impacted our lives, work, school, and even how we interact with our loved ones. It brought many challenges to our daily routine and taught us new ways of working, living, and surviving. This pandemic has proved that we survive together as a community and that we all have a part to partake in our society. From the TTC drivers, to the cashier workers, to doctors and nurses, essential workers have put their own lives at risk to make sure that we can still get food to our table and receive the treatments we need. We are all in this together, and this pandemic will make us more resilient. A sentence that we have repeatedly heard over social media, news articles, and pretty much about everywhere. What does resilience really mean? How do we become more resilient? And what are the challenges on the road to resiliency? Our guest today will have these questions and many more answered. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm very excited for our discussion today. And I'd just like to introduce Elizabeth. Elizabeth Molin has been dedicated to serving the newcomer community in Toronto for over 12 years, specializing in the personal development of individuals through capacity building and training, with a background in sociology and human resources, and extensive experience in community service. Elizabeth has successfully developed, implemented, and managed various community programs during her career in both the corporate and social service sector. Elizabeth is a certified personality dimension trainer, a model for exploring temperament patterns that help individuals understand themselves and others in order to be more effective in their work and relationships. Elizabeth is passionate about personal and professional development, wellness, and community building. In her current role as a manager, children, youth, and family program at North York Community House, Elizabeth supports much of the core programming that is vital to the wellness of our community. As a working mom of two young children, Elizabeth has learned to keep smiling even through a pandemic. Each day is a new adventure for her. Elizabeth Molina, thank you again for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Tarek, for having me. Excited to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And, it's been over 14 months so far since the first lockdown in Canada. And I really just want to know, how are you doing through all of this? And how have you been navigating through it all?
Well, I think like many, coping and surviving, taking day by day, and definitely looking to lean on each other for support. I know I have the privilege to work from home, and I do have family supporting me with my two young children at home, but it still comes with its challenges, especially being a mom of two young children. My eldest, he's only in senior kindergarten, so he has been the hardest boss that I've ever had, but he's also been the best assistant. And it's a reminder that he's always watching me, so he keeps me smiling and moving forward. So essentially, it's just feeling one day at a time and starting my day with gratitude. It has not been easy, but every day gets a little bit better. And no matter what, through all these lockdowns, you can't close the forest, you can't close the trails, the walks, the parks. So that's been my everyday, almost everyday escape where I go to recoup, and that's my safety place.
And a lot of people could relate to that, right? Especially the aspect of working from home and having kids around. And, it's both, as what you said, the challenge and the beautiful support that they provide. So thank you for sharing that. And today our topic is about resilience. Before we jump into that, I would love to hear a little bit about your story and why does this why today's topic matters to you.
I feel like it matters to me because it's a part of my way of living. For many, this feeling of this pandemic, it's repeating the same day, day after day, and it feels like it's never ending over and over again. So for me, having had when I just came back to work after my second mat leave, I only worked 1 month in the office before I was sent back into the back at home to work from home and survive and be a mom and do all the things that we're all doing. So it felt like no matter what was happening, it was constant change, constant interruptions to my what I thought would be a routine. But it wasn't. It wasn't like that, right? You start to feel like as if you're trapped, like as if things are just harder and harder day by day. So it took a lot of trial and error, and it still does to this day. We keep adjusting until it works. And then when that doesn't work anymore, we start again and we try something else. If I didn't have this background and understanding of resiliency, these days would definitely a lot darker and they'd be a lot harder. But fortunately, I'm okay asking for help and relying on my family. So they're there to help me, and I know when I need to come up for air, to take rest, to take care of myself. So this matters to me because I'm becoming and growing every day through my resiliency characteristics. So I become comfortable with uncertainty, and you can always be certain that no matter what, there's going to be uncertainty, and that's okay.
That is very true, and you touched on something really important, which is asking for help, and that really stood out for me. I find it challenging even for myself to ask for help, and I guess, as what you said, is that the more resilient we become, the easier it becomes asking for help and receiving support. I feel like there's that two aspect, right? First
Mm-hmm.
is asking for the help, and second is like being even okay with receiving the support. Because sometimes help is being offered to us, and we're like, and no, I'm doing okay. I'll figure it out on my own.
That's right.
So
That's right.
thank you so much for sharing that. And Elizabeth, I have prepared a quick resilience quiz for you.
Exciting.
I will be sharing my screen. It's 5 questions, and I just want you to answer those questions from your truth, from the perspective of resilience.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so here it goes. Okay, so the first question: when you sorry, we started the other way around. All right, here we go. First question: you have a meeting with a client downtown. You usually don't go to that part of the city, and you get lost. You are running late for your meetings. Your phone battery is dying, and you cannot check your GPS. What do you do? And I have three options for you. First, you continue walking and figure you will find the place eventually, even if you are late. Two, you ask people in the street for direction and borrow a phone to make a call to your client to let them know you're running late. And three, you are tired and frustrated and decide to go home. Better not think about this day anymore. Which one would you choose?
Oh goodness, Tarek, I feel like you read my journal. This happens to me all the time. I've had so many situations like that. Um, so the real answer for this, and I'm being honest in terms of my level of resiliency, is that I would keep walking and figure it out, and eventually hope that I arrive to the place and know that I'm late. Realistically, I would want to be able to have the confidence to be able to talk to a stranger and ask for that help of borrowing a phone. But that action of talking to a stranger is intimidating, especially if you're in downtown Toronto and you're surrounded by a lot of I don't know, intimidating stupid people. So I would get scared to want to ask, and that's something that I guess I'm working on still with my level of resiliency, is asking for help to strangers, not only within my comfort level but asking outside of that. But the real answer would be I would keep walking.
And thank you for sharing that. I think it is a reality, right? We just spoke about the aspect of asking for help, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also about who do you ask for help from, and how comfortable do you feel, in both your comfort zone and in your brave zone.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it is challenging to ask, people that you don't know at all. So thank you for speaking your truth, and
All
we're going to question number two.
right.
And you are at the grocery store lineup. This is COVID inspired. Um,
Lineups.
you are at the grocery store lineup, and as you are about to go in, you realized you forgot your mask at home. What do you do? You ask the store worker at the entrance if they have a mask to give to you as you've forgotten yours at home. You go back and feel terrible for not paying more attention. Or you remember you
Mm.
have a scarf in your bag and improvise wearing it as a face covering.
Those are good options. I think I would ask the store worker at the entrance. So number one, and I think that's because it's becoming more and more common that that's what the front support staff are there at the stores, is to make sure everybody's following the rules. So they should have masks for me, and I think I would be comfortable asking them for masks. If I did have a scarf on, that's an easy solution, but it's uncomfortable to wear a bulky scarf in your face. So I think I'd rather ask for the mask.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And going to question number three. You hear that one of your friends is hosting a birthday party. Good old days. On the weekend, you get very excited, but the invitation never comes. Next week, all your friends are talking about the party. What is your reaction?
Ooh.
First, I feel terribly hurt, but never admit it to anyone, and it bothers me for weeks. Two, I'm annoyed and approach my friend and nicely ask why I wasn't invited. And three, I assume it was just a mix up and forget all about it.
Okay. I think in my current life, because I'm so busy and I don't have maybe the time to open up the conversation with my friend, I might assume that it's just a mix up and forget about it and just move on.
I see. I would want to add another layer to this.
Okay.
Um, let's say it's Friday, and the weekend gonna be the party's taking place on Saturday, and you still have not received the invitation. Would you at
Mm.
all reach out or say, check in with your friend and see what's happening?
Yeah, I guess if it's Friday and it's happening the next day, I could definitely reach out to the friend and maybe not directly ask them why I'm not invited, but maybe I'll say something. So, what plans do you have for the weekend? And see what comes up, and see if I do get the invitation in that I guess approach. But I don't think I would.
That
Yeah,
that's very smart. You're like touch on, check in, and you're like, I'm not directly asking you, but I'm seeing your plans and so on. That's very smart.
yeah,
Um, and I think resilience is about that. Is about letting the wise mind taking over and decide that the wise aspect of you. What do I do in this situation?
that's right.
Um,
Do I look for conflict or do I look for a solution that might give me a little bit of satisfaction?
and later on, we're gonna speak about how resilience is a way to meet our needs. So,
Hmm.
exactly to your point. So, moving to the fourth question.
Hmm.
You have been working very hard at work and you think a promotion is coming any day. When you arrived at the office on a Monday, you find out that your coworker got the promotion you wanted. How do you react? One, I get angry but don't say anything to my boss. Two, I feel frustrated and decide not to get my hopes up anymore. Three, I am disappointed, but I think there must be a reason. I talk to my boss about it and ask what I need to accomplish to advance.
Oh, great question and great answers, actually. So I feel like I would feel all of those, starting from number one to number two to number three. I feel like it's such a chronicle order that you put it here. Naturally, you feel a certain way. You feel an emotion from being disappointed. So it's natural to feel either angry, disappointment, or a certain way. But then I would move forward to the next piece, which is I will probably feel frustrated and decide not to get my hopes up anymore and maybe start to cope with my feelings that way. But most definitely, the answer that I would go with is number three. I'd be disappointed, but I would definitely want to see what the reasons are or talk to my boss to find out if it's what are the steps that I need to do to get to that point if I'm missing or if I'm missing certain characteristics or traits that are needed for this position. And it could be two-way in the sense that perhaps I didn't get this position. It could be not because I'm underqualified, but it might be because I'm being prepared for something different, something better. That's not necessarily this position. So there could be two ways to approach it. And I think I would want to talk to the boss to find out, oh, fantastic. Congratulations to so and so. I'd love to know what are the steps needed for me to reach that point in my career as well.
I like how you approach it and how you looked at all answers and you acknowledge the feeling, you acknowledge
Mhm.
what's gonna come up at that moment, you acknowledge how you may deal with it, and third is like, what can I do about it?
That's
How
right.
how do I turn all those feelings that are inside of me into an action that through resilience would benefit me? So I
That's
really
right.
love that. And my last question of the resiliency quiz, here it goes. When you think about the most difficult times you have faced in the past, what is your first thought? One,
Oh,
life is so unfair. Why do these things happen to me? Two, thank God that's behind me. Three, I wouldn't necessarily want to live through it again, but I learned so much from it.
fantastic answers. Actually, I feel like naturally you feel those emotions again in the same way. But my response to that would be don't want to go through that again, but let's see what I can learn from that. And I think a piece about resiliency is being able to, bounce out of a situation. You can either bounce back to where you were after that situation happened, or you can bounce forward and try to learn from that and be able to take the feelings that of the mistake or of the difficulty that happened to see how can I become better from that situation. So I feel like you don't really fail in life. You only fail if you don't learn from that situation. So as long as you learn from that situation and you move forward, then you're definitely being able to be resilient and look for other or keep keep optimistic and positive for what's to come in the future.
I love what you said regarding that. It's like there's that aspect of resilience, but there's that aspect of toxic positivity, right? Of,
Hmm.
oh no, let's feel happy. Let's not feel our feelings and let's feel whatever other feelings that we're not feeling. But your approach is like, no, let's acknowledge that this is our feelings right now, and let's acknowledge the support that we have around us, and let's see what it is that we could do in our control to work to progress in our lives. So that is really meaningful. And thank you so much for sharing that with me.
No problem. Happy to play.
Um, so thank you for playing that quiz. You know, these are many examples of life that we have been in, and and improvising to find solutions for situations that we experience on a daily basis. We find more ways to honor our needs and pave the road to intentional resilience. And as I said earlier, resilience has been a hot word lately and is quite needed during this pandemic. So, can you tell me from your perspective, what is resilience and what does it mean to our community?
Yeah, I feel like resiliency is defined based on your own individual experiences. Each person will have their own definition of what that might be based on what they've gone through in life. But for me, resiliency, it's the ability to bounce back, or as I said earlier, bounce forward from your personal crisis, tragedy, or whatever that downtime might be in life. And it's important to realize that these past experiences and what you do with the past will help shape our future. So resiliency is about being able to overcome challenges of all types. For the community, I would say resiliency is more so about realizing that it's not about carrying on regardless of how you feel. It's more about it's not about being a superhuman. It's more about being able to know that okay, you're feeling these emotions, you're feeling stress, you're coping with the difficulties of life, but how are you taking care of yourself? How are you being able to deal with these situations more effectively? So this means knowing that what we are experiencing, it does matter, and how we deal with it does matter. So to be resilient means that we can continue to grow and to be better, regardless of the challenges and barriers that the communities are facing right now. It's just looking for that support.
And it's not in any way not acknowledging the feelings that we have, but it's taking those feelings and feeling them and understand them and see what is it that we could do, if I'm getting this right, to moving forward.
That's right. You don't want to ignore the feelings you're feeling. You want to address them. You want to honor them. You want to give yourself time to grieve that dark space that you're in. But resiliency is all about knowing how to get out of that space and knowing what supports and tools you need to hold on to be able to move forward.
And Elizabeth, how can we develop resilience?
So I feel like resiliency, as I talked earlier, it starts with your individual experience. So being aware of yourself. Who are you? What are your coping mechanisms? What are your reactions to life events? So how do you have to ask these questions to yourself? How do we cope with stress? How do we accept help? Do we rest and care for ourselves? So depending on how we do this and recognize what is working, we're able to start adding the tools and activities to help us be more resilient. So knowing what we can do and what we already have is building our self-confidence. So one piece of developing your self-resiliency is having self-confidence. And something that is often ignored is that critical element of support. Who is helping you? Are you looking for help? Are you seeking it? Are you ignoring the help that's being given to you? And another piece about that is adaptability. So we don't want you to just keep moving forward, but we want you to focus on solution focused, I guess, tools that might help you get to where you want to be. You want to be flexible and open minded to new opportunities that come out of this tragic event that you might be going through. And most importantly, it's knowing your purpose. Why do you do what you do? Why do you want to keep moving forward? It's being able to visualize your success that you want to feel in life. Like, what does it feel, taste like to be where you want to be? And that'll help you continue being resilient as you go through.
I love what you said about self-awareness and about building that confidence and receiving that support. Does it matter where it comes from and what support that you need? Um, and that flexibility that you talk about being adaptable and open to the changes that are going to happen. And I think the last part that you touched on, the purpose is very important. Knowing exactly what it is that moving you forward is a key, definitely in resiliency. Um, this show is focused on the journey of newcomers, and newcomer has been very resilient, especially in settling in a new country and so on. But why is resilience um, important for newcomers?
Yeah, it's important because as newcomers, they're coming to a new country to settle, whether they've come here by choice or because they're fleeing another place from their home countries. They've already faced a lot of challenges getting to this point in their life, and with that comes a lot of barriers to resettle in the new country. But in order to thrive and to belong, as you have there in your logo there, you need to recognize what being resilient requires. And a piece of that is to empower your assets, empower your experiences. Start with what you already have, but adapting that and refocusing that to a new setting to help newcomers reach their goals. It's about helping newcomers. It's important for newcomers to help them move forward with a positive mindset. The resilient people believe that they can make a difference and be successful in their new setting. And for newcomers, if they have that sense of perspective, even with the trauma that they might have faced back home, it would help them, I guess, have a more clear path that they want to pursue now in this new country. And one of the challenges that often gets noted is that language or translation of resiliency. Is this something that newcomers know about? And even though they've experienced it, can they define it? Can they say, oh, I've been resilient and this is how I need to continue being?
I love what you said, and especially that aspect of could we define it, as a person. My first language is Arabic, and how regardless how hard I try to translate resilience into Arabic, it just there isn't a word that explains what it is. So uh, I guess just understanding that not definition but experience of
Life
resilience.
experiences, yeah. And that's why I love the quiz that you shared earlier, because we didn't talk about I guess definitions of characters, or we didn't talk about theories involved in being motivated, for example. We talked about real life experiences, and those real life experiences is what we all go through. Newcomers oftentimes feel those experiences, they just don't know how to define the tools to be attached to that experience to help them thrive and belong.
That is very true. We all share those experiences. And I guess now my question is regarding what do you think is the connection between resiliency and self care?
That is a fantastic question. Um, so it's basically comes down to survival versus intentional. So how do you support yourself with resiliency? I love using this metaphor about being pushed into a pool. In the beginning of the pandemic, all of us were basically pushed into this massive water lake and just had to know how to swim. You would probably move frantically, move your body in 1,000 ways until it worked and you weren't drowning. But then you exhaust yourself and you tire yourself out completely. In this second year of the pandemic, if instead we can grab a floating device and then jump into the water, that is what self care looks like. That's what's that element needed within resiliency to be able to keep, I guess, surviving a lot longer than if you were just thrown into the situation. So it comes down to that piece around survival versus intentional. So now that we are in this space, how much further can we swim with the self care support in us?
I really love your example, and uh, the pool analogy it really stood out for me. And we're all struggling with understanding what self care even is, right? Even for me, I'm like, Esteban, caring for, like giving myself that pat on the shoulder and like you got this, or is it the actions that I do? And I guess we're all learning how to care more for ourselves, how to
Right.
provide. But if you have anything to add to that piece of self care, what is it? What it really is for our audience today?
It's really going beyond the basic essentials. So you have your sleep, you have your food, you have your hydration. That's your basic needs of self-care that we all know and we all look for. We want sense of security and that we have a home to live at and that we have access to food. Self-care is going one level higher than that, which is actually providing yourself time to feel emotions, to rest and let the body literally rest beyond just sleeping, but having an easy day, for example. So if that's escaping to the woods or looking for maybe some kind of healthcare support through a massage or speaking to a professional in the healthcare sector about how you're feeling, that could be a piece of self-care as well. Journal writing, painting, there's so many things that bring you to that sense of feeling of peace, and that's, for me, is what self-care means: having that sense of just tranquility, feeling healthy and able to access that as well, and just being able to let the body rest and just have a period of time where you're just listening to the music and just dancing, for example.
I love that, and it really is different to everyone. Every individual has different ways of providing that care for themselves. And I love how you said it's not the basic need. It's going that step farther after the basic needs. And from the way how I operate, sometimes like, yeah, but I gotta work hard to get what I need to get and to do what I want to do. But it sounds, based on what you're saying, it's like working hard is also like, take, if you really want to work hard, implementing self-care as a part of your working hard is what going to benefit you on the long run. um yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say that's exactly it. And if you're able to reach this far based on survival mechanisms only, imagine how much further you can go if you actually introduce tools for self care. You would be able to reach so much more because you're having that time to reflect, to re energize, to let the body and mind grow as you go through these experiences.
Thank you for adding that. And that brings me to another question of what's the difference between improvisation and intentional resiliency.
Yeah. For me, that means it's the level of awareness. So, are you doing this consciously? Are you mindful of your feelings? Are you mindful of how it affects your body, how it affects your emotions, how it affects your state of mind? So, in the quiz examples, many times we do things just because it's how we've seen others do it. But if you accept and intentionally prepare yourself to accept the unknown and face adversity, but with acceptance, then you intentionally become more resilient. You're open to new opportunities. It's not sticking to the plan. It's being aware that, okay, things might not work. For example, we're here live on a Facebook live piece. My internet might go down suddenly. What do I do? Right? How do we finally reconnect? And it's being able to be aware that that might happen, but we can figure it out.
I love that, and I do remember our first meeting in preparation for this session. We spoke about the improvisation and the intentional resilience, and I remember that conversation went for a good 20 minutes or so. So I love how you summed it up in this beautiful way of answering the question. Thank you so much for that. And my question now is really focused on newcomers and what are the challenges of resiliency for newcomers particularly.
Yeah. For newcomers, depending on the type of newcomer that's arrived, it's time. The biggest challenge is having time and making time. If they're doing never ending work schedules or shift work and there's demands for the basic survival of feeding the kids or of caring for their elder parents that are here, or if they're studying, for example, and they just need to keep going and reading and submitting those school assignments, you keep going and going and going. And the biggest challenge is that they're not introducing that piece of time to be able to self-care for them. And there's also that challenge around trauma from previous experiences. It sets you up a certain way. If you've had certain trauma, it affects your being. And you might lack confidence in your abilities because of that trauma. So a challenge for newcomers is believing in their actual abilities that they have to be able to open themselves up and look for other opportunities. So depending on how you see receiving support and asking for help, for some people, asking for help is a weakness. It's you're weak if you ask for help. You got to be able to do this on your own. That's a mentality that some cultures have. But if you look at looking for help, so seeking support, it's a good thing rather than something that might be considered shameful. It's a way to make yourself even stronger by asking for help. You know, there's that metaphor that if it's easy to break one branch, right? But if you had a whole bunch of branches come together and you needed to break that together, so those are your support systems, it's harder for you to break that way if you have more people supporting and surrounding yourself. So for newcomers, it's recognizing the challenge is recognizing that asking for help is okay, depending on their culture and where they're from, that might be considered shameful. Another big challenge that I think is often the economic inequality that might come with that. Sometimes things that are advertised as tools for self-care cost money. For example, can you afford going to get a massage? Is if you don't have benefits or if you don't have that extra money laying around, those are things that are out of your own reach. So it's a challenge to be able to access what's advertised as self-care because it's just beyond our means. Another big challenge, I think, too, is just understanding the definition of resiliency. We talked about this earlier, you know, how do you easily translate that into their language? Is it talked about a lot back home? Or is it another, I guess, genre of words that we use here in Canada? So it's helping newcomers see what that difference is. And to be honest, you know, in my many years of working with newcomers, we did a training specific to this in 2017. And what I realized was that many newcomers that I met already have this tool of resiliency within them. They've gone through challenges, they know how to redefine themselves. But the piece that I found was the hardest for them was to have those positive characteristics and self-esteem be visible to them to help them move forward. So I think it's about sharpening those tools that they already have and just helping them progress as they need to.
You capture the challenges really well. I feel like, the time aspect is so true when
Mhm.
someone is coming here to settle. There's so much to do. There's a life to be figured out in few days. And there's another life that is left behind to also be grieved in a few days. And between those two challenges, time uh, is almost not there at all. Um, and you touched on trauma, and while while there are certain experiences that are traumatic and people may or may not receive that as trauma, but even coming to another country, leaving everyone that you know behind and everything that you've knew and experienced behind by itself is a huge challenge and is a very meaningful work towards resilience. Um, and I really liked the metaphor. I love your metaphors of the branch and how you could, and I think that is something I'm familiar with and a lot of people definitely familiar with. Though, I come from a background where uh, that metaphor is used.
Mhm.
However, asking for support is still a sign of weakness.
I
So
see.
it's like, how do we bring those two things that we believe in a way to say, no, it actually is a way for me to progress.
Yeah.
Asking for support and having all those other branches around to support me would make me stronger and would make them stronger.
And one thing I also want to recognize is that you mentioned, you know, for newcomers, when they come to a new country, they leave everything behind. That also includes the support system that they were comfortable with using. So that might be their friends, their family, their classmates from, you know, childhood, for example. So when they come to a new country, building up that social support is such a challenge for them, just to create an immediate circle of care. They're not able to maybe have that in person, or well, now in person in COVID we can't really do so much in person, but just close proximity of family members that you can rely on. And so when they're looking for social supports, they might be still looking for that support back home and not necessarily here in their new setting of what's around them. And that might be a challenge for them, that they don't open themselves up to new relationships within their school, within their community, within their faith groups, because they're holding on so dearly to what's back home. That a piece of resiliency is also being able to build that social support system with other people that are not necessarily your closest family, your closest friends. So it's kind of, it reminded me of that example of the quiz of, I said, I wouldn't want to ask for help to a stranger on the street, I said, right? Especially in the downtown world, because it's intimidating. That example is probably very similar to what a lot of newcomers face. They don't want to maybe ask for help to their teacher or to other classmates in their school that might speak English a little bit more advanced, or even in the workplace, they don't want to build that community of support there because they're just wanting to hold on to what's back home, and it's just intimidating. So that brings in that ties in that piece about self-confidence, that other elements of resiliency is believing in themselves and being okay to ask for help. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge that it doesn't resolve itself one day. It takes time for that to be built.
And that is a real challenge, right? Being able to, as what you said, that example was amplified in newcomers. Everyone around them is that stranger in downtown core, right? Everyone is someone they just met. How could I trust you? How could I build that trust? And it's gonna take a while. And it really sounds like it's not just the challenge, but it's an act of self care is to build that support system around you. And that could look like having friends, your circle at school, teachers, and so on, and people from the community and community organizations like what we do, right? But also having other activities that only for you, that provide that safety for yourself. So thank you again for touching on that. My next question is, how can a newcomer navigate and overcome the challenges you mentioned?
Yeah, well, you started with the solution there, which is, seeking community supports and resources in the community with people that speak the same language, for example. So that's one way. Another way is to have a more clear and realistic perception of themselves. I can relate to that very easily as a mom. You are defining yourself again. You knew who you were before being a parent, and now the person you are now after, you have to redefine that individual. It's the same, it could be the same for newcomers, is that when they leave their country, they're leaving that identity behind, and now that they're starting in a new setting, in a new society, who do they want to be, and who are they with the influences of this new world? Who are they becoming? So if that newcomer is able to have a more clear and realistic perception of themselves, perhaps being more mindful of their needs, it'll allow them to do that self-care, for example, walking in the park. And it's also about understanding what it means and connecting that experience to that definition of self-awareness. Do they know that they're being resilient? Do they know that by being resilient, they're really empowering themselves with more opportunities? They just have to be open to those opportunities. And a piece about trauma is that our ability to display such resiliency is often conditioned by our responses to the past, the stresses in our past. And that can get locked in the body and prevent us from springing forward or bouncing back. So self-care and mindfulness techniques can really help newcomers navigate away from those negative energies and move through the change and challenge with a renewed sense of strength and wisdom.
I really love that. Thank you for sharing that with me. And those challenges are very real and very difficult to navigate and overcome, but they are definitely possible. And they may take some time, but they're they're always, I think about it this way: they've made it this far, and they always will make it farther. Um, and I guess that is an aspect of what they could do on their own, right? But what is it that we could do as a community? What are our shared social responsibility in supporting newcomers and becoming more resilient, not only in settling, but also in thriving and belonging?
Yeah, I think, it would be amazing if we were to be able to provide accessible options. I mentioned that piece about income inequality, right? So if we were able to provide accessible options for self-care that are able to be either culturally or language appropriate based on their experiences, where space is given to be curious and explore, and also just to slow down and provide attention to their health. If we can provide that space as a community service center, then we're allowing newcomers to rediscover themselves. Another piece that we can do is remove the barriers that prevent resiliency in newcomers, whether that be lack of confidence or lack of resources to take action. Our social responsibility is to provide equitable opportunities to reach this level of resilience. So our programs need to be addressing these moments of again, positive happiness feelings, but without ignoring the trauma and without ignoring the stresses that they already bring. We need to give space to these emotions in order for us to move forward. So we need to be able to provide newcomers with an opportunity to approach themselves with support by recognizing their trauma and being able to later on reach out for that new tool of resiliency.
I love that, and I love what you said earlier about exploring the new identity, right? You mentioned that you've had a very clear understanding, and you were very self-aware of your own identity up until you became a mom, and you're like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
new identity. And it sounds like also for newcomers, when they come here, it's a new identity. There's the identity that they had from back home, and there's their social positioning here,
Yeah,
in a new country. So I really like the piece that you highlighted: accessible options to explore that new identity, to be curious about it, because it is something that to be explored. It's new. It has not. I it's I hate labeling, but sometimes like my label is a refugee. So
mm-hmm.
it's a new identity. It's something that I'm like, hold on, what does that really mean to me? What does it mean to
Exactly.
people around me? Um, so I really love that aspect of accessible option.
Yeah, and I feel this is another piece about the newcomer experience. We all come here with a sense of hope and joy and excitement of a new setting. So there's that honeymoon phase where you're on a high and you're feeling excited to be in a new space and a new home or new community. But then there's a massive dip that happens when reality really does hit and you start working and you start really realizing that your language maybe isn't what you thought it was. You start recognizing that, oh no, this is harder than I thought. So there's that massive dip and you're out of that honeymoon phase. And then for 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 us as workers in the community, our job is to help newcomers dip out of that and start recognizing, okay, yes, it's hard, but let's understand, let's redefine yourself. Who are you now? Who do you want to be? What are your motivators? What's your purpose? What is your I guess, what are the dreams that you have that are challenging to receive and to accept in this new setting, because there are a lot more barriers, but don't lose focus of that and help them be able to slowly build up towards that. It's as I, one thing is that resiliency is not a end game. It's not an end result. It's something that helps to keep moving forward, and it's always going to be there. So if we're able to provide that support to newcomers consistently, then that might be able to help them continue moving forward.
And that honeymoon phase really stands out to me. When before I came to Canada, I was in Lebanon, and I'll tell you a quick story about this. And it was, I'd say, 10 days before coming to Canada when they called me, told me that the visa's ready and things gonna work out, and they prepare something called orientation for Canada's orientation, something along that line, by an organization called IOM, and they brought us for 3 days prior to leaving to Canada, and it was a really nice hotel where you get a room inside the hotel to attend that orientation. I'm like, maybe my family is right. Once I get there, there is a money tree, and I'm just gonna get the money out of the tree, like well,
Wow.
from right now, it's like um amazing food,
Ooh.
uh 3 days in a really nice hotel. I'm like, oh, what's waiting for me? And that fast forward, I come here, I land in Toronto, and I'm like, okay, now what? There's a snowstorm outside.
Well, you came in the winter.
Oh yeah, I came in December, and there's a snowstorm outside. It took us half an hour to land, and then we're like, okay, I'm now at the airport. Now what? Where's the money tree? So
Yeah.
and from there everything crashed, right? I'm like, where am I going now? What's gonna happen? And the reality was very different. So like even those expected, like a while ago you mentioned about like being realistic, right?
Mhm.
And even those expectations, sometimes it's like perceived in like the Western world, everything is amazing, everything is easy, which is never is.
No.
um so having those realistic expectations and having that support is really important. Providing it as a community is really important. um I want to ask you, how can we do better as a society to support newcomers?
I feel like if we're able to empower each other to be resilient and recognize that it takes time, providing that space for time and knowing that it's one step at a time, that it will be able to provide a better sense of realistic expectations by being resilient. And it comes back to that, right? Having clear, realistic expectations of what's in your future by understanding and having a more increased self-awareness of your own individual self. So it's resiliency is not a destination, but it's rather the vehicle for your journey. So it's something that has to be constantly around.
Can you
You're
say that one more time? Can
sure.
you say that? I love that. Can you say it one more time, please?
Definitely. I'll say it louder for the people in the back. Resiliency, it's not a destination, but rather it's the vehicle for your journey that you're on right now in life. It's constant.
Wow. Wow, that's very meaningful. That is very meaningful. It's not a destination. It's something that we're not gonna reach. It's something that we take with us. It's what takes us there.
That's right.
I love that. Um Elizabeth, what are some of the messages you would like to share with us today, from your work with newcomers?
Yeah. You know, I want to remind everybody that just the way, we hear this all the time, essential, 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 right? This is essential to the pandemic. This is essential to our needs. I want you to remember that your time to yourself is just as important and it's an essential need for you as well. It's just as important as sleeping, it's just as important as eating. We need to socialize. We need to have that time to ourselves to really care, to really heal. And that time to ourselves is going to enable us to be more resilient. So take one step at a time and know that resiliency, as I mentioned, it's not a destination. It's not the end of the game, but rather it's what you're doing as you move forward and forward. So I want you to remember just to smile, to breathe, and just go slowly in life. That's a quote that's from, I'm probably not pronouncing the name correctly, but Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese spiritual poet and leader, peace activist. And it's, for me, that's a quote that really sticks when you're thinking about resiliency is, smile, that positive atmosphere that you receive from just smiling. Go slowly and don't forget to breathe.
Thank you so much for that, and for that piece of wisdom. Um, this conversation has been so beautiful and so amazing, and I don't want it to end. But could we tell our audience how can they get in touch with you or to learn more about this topic and where
Yeah.
they can find more resources and support?
Yeah. You know, the beautiful thing is that resiliency is the hot buzzword right now. So a lot of people are offering it. A lot of people are showcasing how to be resilient and, the tools and the pieces needed. So it's literally available to our disposal right now through so many different means. One piece is the City of Toronto has and I believe it's posted in the comments, a little quick infographic, a reminder of how to be resilient during the pandemic. And that relates to everyone, newcomers, established Canadians. It relates to all of us. There's a lot of experts out there. There's a lot of community centers such as CanMakes that provide professional expert advice for this. So you're able to, click the links on the comments. They'll be able to lead you to that type of support if you're looking for individual healing and care. But more so for social support, if you want to feel belonging, you want to thrive by understanding a better sense of yourself, right here in Northern Community House, we have so many programs that provide a space for you to discover yourself as an individual. Whether it's be for a newcomer youth, we have a lot of youth programs. We have adult training opportunities to help you rebuild that self-confidence. There's a lot of we also have our niche wellness page that has a lot of tips and techniques for self-care. And so if you I believe it's being shared on the comments right now. All those programs are available. They're free for our community, so please reach out. Remember that seeking help is not a weakness, but rather it's a way to empower yourself to become a better version of who you are.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And yes, Jacqueline, my support in the background. See, we all need a lot of support. Shout out to Jacqueline. She will be posting all those resources in the comments. And I guess my follow up question. You're the manager of children and youth and family, and uh, all the programs that goes under that. Could you tell me a little bit, just very briefly, about the youth programming that's happening, the family programming that's happening,
Sure.
and how could people get enrolled in that?
Yeah, the beautiful thing about the programs that I manage right now is that it's really inclusive of the whole family unit. So we have a space for everyone. We have the after school program, which provides free online space right now virtually, to learn about themselves. And it's fantastic because the perspective of the program is on health, not necessarily after school and academic support. It's more so on the child's health, and that includes their personal well-being, their development through hygiene and all the hormones that take in place in those middle years. So we address topics related to that. So it really helps identify the child's self through those supports, and those are free. They're available every day. You're able to go onto the niche website and click on the link to register. It's available to anyone within right now. Because we're online, you don't necessarily have to be a part of a specific school to attend this after school program. So it's right now definitely open to everyone. We also have our newcomer youth programs. They have a lot of different, I guess, themes of programs that they're supporting newcomers through. One of them is through art. So we do have I believe it's called Behind the Screen program, which takes place every Friday, and they explore themselves. They explore their feelings through art and self-expression through that. So it's a fantastic space for people to connect, learn, and just build, I guess, a positive space for each other. Another wonderful thing that we have going on is our seniors program. So we have yoga happening online, but we also have one-on-one digital literacy support. So that's huge. We all know the world right now is virtual. Seniors have the biggest challenge with that. So we are providing one-on-one support to be able to help them build those digital literacy skills, but also have access to devices in order for them to be able to connect, because that's a big barrier, right? And here we are addressing that by providing accessible free devices for our seniors. So that's one piece of program as well. Another piece that I want to talk about is their adult learning programs. So we do have trainings happening throughout the year. They vary depending on the hot topic of the season that we might be in. So earlier than the pandemic, it was about how to navigate through challenging times. So it did talk a lot about building that, I guess, uh, better self-esteem to be able to get through that. So there are a lot of trainings available to adults. It's open to anyone. You don't have to be a newcomer to attend these specific programs. So if you feel you're in the need for that, it is open for anyone. So please take a look at the website.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And, as what you said, the programs are for the whole family, for the children, for the parents, and for the youth. So it's amazing to see the work that you guys are doing. And I just want to also mention that we have a team of settlement workers that speaks so many languages. So if you want something that is a bit more familiar within your language and you want the support to get you in contact to all the other support that you want and that you need in settling and thriving and in belonging in your new community, please reach out, as what Elizabeth mentioned, reach out through our website, through our Facebook, through the comments on this video, whatever is comfortable for you, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Elizabeth, our time has passed very quickly. I do not want this conversation to end, but I would love to have you again and again to talk about all about resiliency and all about the work that you do. Before I end the session today, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the resilience in our communities and the communities that we serve. I work closely with many newcomers, and I'm a newcomer myself, and I work with both immigrants and refugees. And I'm very, very impressed by the amount of resourcefulness and resilience in our communities. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining me today, for telling us how we can sharpen those skills, how we could get even better and even more resilient. This has been a great start for Settle, Thrive, and Belong. I really enjoyed this conversation with you. Thank you so much for all of our listeners, for your support as well. And before I end this episode, I would like to give you, Elizabeth, the floor to share anything you would like with me.
Yeah, I want to remind you of that quote I shared with you early. Smile, breathe, and go slowly. You don't need to rush through life. There's always we won't have this time again, actually, right? So we want to remember to go slowly. And that is the quote from Thich Nhat Hanh, to remember just to go slowly.
I love that. Smile, breathe, and go slowly. Take it one step at a time.
Okay.
Thank you again for your time, and I will see you all in 2 weeks. Until then, please stay safe. Bye bye now.